Tell us a little bit about yourself and your district.
I'm from a rural district and a lot of farming and smaller communities. Very hardworking people, strong work ethic, and they are frugal for the most part and want to take care of themselves and expect government for the most part to live within its means. As far as a little bit about myself, I was raised on a dairy farm. I attended University of Minnesota for about a year and a half, and also North Hennepin Junior College. And then I went, in between there, I was in the Marine Corps, 71 to 73. So I was in during the Vietnam War, but I didn't have to serve or go over to Vietnam. And so I came back, went to college for a few years, and then I got married on October 18th, 1975, to my beautiful wife, Emily. We had 3 daughters. We now have 4 grandchildren. And I started in insurance in February 1st, 1978. And I own an independent insurance agency right now. And it's multi-line. And I've got 3 agents and several secretaries that work for me.
And what led you to run for the position of state representative?
One of the primary concerns is healthcare reform. I don't know if you're familiar with the demographer's report, Tom Gillespie. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that completely correctly, but his report shows that if we don't solve the escalating healthcare costs and premiums, that all additional or available tax dollars or new tax dollars will be used up in healthcare premiums and cost. There will be no additional money for roads, bridges, education, or higher education. So we are at a critical point in our healthcare cost. Our care is excellent, but we have to address the escalating costs. Now, there's a difference between the DFL and the Republican caucus. The DFL has submitted bills in the past of a single-payer plan, a government-run health care plan. It goes even further than Obamacare. In my opinion, that is going to, well, not only my opinion, but the facts show government-run health care transfers millions of dollars into government bureaucracy and away from the doctor-patient relationship. You also have nameless, faceless bureaucrats micromanaging the doctor and deciding what type of care you get, when you get the care, and how long you have to wait for the care. And that, of course, leads to healthcare rationing. I'm totally opposed to that. Most of the countries that you look at, Canada, England, others, the costs are escalating and the actual care is decreasing. I believe in private sector solutions. I think we need to open our borders up to competition, bring more competition into the state, reform medical malpractice insurance laws. Texas has an excellent model that has actually led to an increase in the number of doctors, and especially in the rural area. And one of the reasons we're losing our doctors in the rural area is because of the high overhead cost. So we need to reform medical malpractice, and we also need to reform in a way that brings down the cost for doctors to operate in the rural area, because it's almost unaffordable right now.
So if you could offer up the first bill of the session, would it be related to healthcare reform, or would it be something else?
That would be one of my primary goals, would be to offer the healthcare reform. I'll be requesting to be on the Health and Human Services Committee. The Lord willing, I'll be able to be on that committee. It's my area of expertise. I've sold health insurance for 32 years. I've sat at the table with people who have literally cried when they've seen their the rise in their health care premiums. Many of them have health conditions that allow them to be trapped in that policy, so it's very difficult to afford. And yet, because of their health care situation, they can't make a change. We have to change change our healthcare delivery in terms of the premium structure dramatically. Right now, we have a lot of prepaid healthcare, and we need to go back to the concept of health insurance, and that includes higher deductibles such as HSAs, and rather than having everything paid at a low copay or at 100%.
When the end of session finally rolls around in May, what will determine whether or not you have been a successful legislator?
There will be about three things that would be things that I would look at. Number one, did we pass true health care reform? Okay? And by that I mean moving towards the private sector, medical malpractice insurance, opening the borders for our borders for competition, along with a number of other factors. Number two would be to balance the state's budget without tax increase. We have to learn to live within our means. We have a health and human services budget that's going up by 30-some%. That is simply unsustainable. I think the overall budget is going up between 17 and 20%. Revenues are going up approximately 7 to 8%. We have an increase in revenue, but government spending is going up at a rate that is simply unsustainable. And a big part of that is healthcare reform. So if we can address the healthcare reform, it will help us solve the budget crisis, not only now, but also in the future. The third area that I would say I would like to see would be energy reform, the repeal of the nuclear power plant ban. I believe that the overwhelming evidence now shows that man-made global warming from the International Panel of Climate Change, which is a UN committee, has been fraudulent and manipulative. It's costing higher energy costs in electricity and in other areas across this state and also nation. I would personally favor repeal of the Minnesota so-called cap and trade bill, some call it others, that have forced communities to put up windmills and things of that nature. Just one comment I'd like to make on alternative energy. I believe in alternative energy, but I don't believe in subsidies for alternative energy. When alternative energy is viable economically, the private sector will bring that energy to market. When government subsidies get involved, we tend to bring that energy to market when it's not efficient and effective before it is. Therefore, you have a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, abuse in those areas, and you spend millions and possibly billions of dollars over a period of time promoting energy products that, for the most part, don't reduce our dependency on foreign oil and just become a waste for the taxpayer. And a good illustration of that, when we started a decade or so ago, we were importing about 50% of our oil. And then we got this big alternative energy push. And what we found is we're importing over 70% of our oil now. So alternative energy has not reduced our oil imports. It's aggravated it in most cases. And the reason for that is because we have brought energy alternatives to market before they're economically viable. Okay? Last thing I'd like to say about that is all energy sources have a waste factor. Nuclear power has the least waste factor. We now can reprocess the waste from the nuclear waste from nuclear power plants up to 90%. So we're down to 10% of what we had before. Europe and the Asian countries are headed towards nuclear power. We also need to utilize clean coal technology. We have more coal resources than almost any place else in the world, and we have to look at utilizing that instead of some of these other ineffective and expensive alternatives that we currently have.
If you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone, living or deceased, who would it be, and what would you talk about?
I think two people in particular, probably Abraham Lincoln. The more I read about the Civil War and how the country was brought to a point where it was, you know, where it broke out in war and willing to kill each other over a number of factors, one of them being slavery, and how he processed that from a political standpoint. I mean, the polarizing views on that issue, and then to believe that or to be a person who represents the whole country, and yet based on what they perceived or believed or were actual political views you had, they decided to secede from the nation, okay? I mean, you literally were a president that was governing at a time when the nation, the United States, broke up into two separate countries. And the implications of that as a president would be, I mean, I don't think you can fully understand that unless you'd be there or have a long conversation with them. The other person, of course, would be, from my standpoint, would be George Washington. I mean, the more you read and study about the Revolutionary War, the defeats during that time, the desertions of the army, the discouragement, you know, you not only had the British, but you had a large percentage of the population of the colonies that didn't support the revolution, actually supported the British. So you were outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded and criticized from every direction. And, you know, it just seemed like the creator named in the Declaration of Independence just gave them a little victory here and there just when needed, or they were at a point where the entire effort could have collapsed. And also some, you know, also some of our founding fathers and people of that nature to get a, because I really have, the more you study U.S. history and patriotism, the more respect and honor you have for the people in those days, the circumstances they went through, and their perseverance in the belief of building liberty and freedom, a free society that we all have been the beneficiary of.